Welcome back to part 2 of Practice Underwater with Nate. And I think maybe there's like a good percentage of the audience that's pretty pissed off at how I ended the last episode. I had time to kind of like reveal the recommendation, but then you wouldn't have been wondering for a week and came back. So I just really wasn't willing to do that. And so I held out a little bit, and we're going to go through Nate's situation again. And I'm going to walk through what I recommend. So if you've listened to part 1, you're coming here because you really want to find out, then, welcome back. And if you listened to part 1, I'm going to give a brief synopsis of Nate's story, and Nate's pain point, and then going from there. So I met Nate back in 2019. Apparently I was blunt, but that doesn't surprise me. And I told Nate that a solo to group transition is what I would recommend. Nate has gone to a group practice, and Nate's practice is like in a secondary, tertiary type area. So doctor attraction is somewhat of a bottleneck. And so Nate has had 5 associates, and ever since 2021 has at least had one person working 3 days a week. So there's always been kind of 2 dentists, but Nate's practice really needs 3 dentists. You got between 4 and 5 hygienists coming Monday through Thursday, and then you have 2 hygienists on Friday. Like it needs a full-time dentist additional to Nate and an associate. And Nate really wants to work like 2 to 3 days a week, wants to cash flow this thing long-term. It's been profitable, and likes dentistry, specifically surgery and implants, and really just wants to have like that. So the problem is kind of the chief complaint, and everything analytically looks really good in Nate's practice. Case acceptance good, retention is unbelievable. AR is honestly like great. So I looked at this and I was like, where's the problem? And then when I talked to Nate, I understood the problem is, Nate kind of does, he described it as a yo-yo, right? Like 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4.5 days a week. And it's like, it just kind of keeps titering based on the number of doctors. And so I asked Nate a question. I said, well, are you willing to just say, screw it, I'm just going to work 3 days a week and live with the consequences? Honestly, that's the direction I would go during these in-between windows. And Nate's like, no, I care too much about the practice. I put too much work in it. We've built up the patient base. Like, I need to go and make sure that we keep it. And so that really leaves one option. And Nate kind of nailed it at the end. It's a minority partner. So Nate took out the current associate to lunch, talked about the 10 to 20% equity, and that was exactly what was going through my mind when we were going through this whole thing. And I think where Nate missed it on the first time is the avatar of doctor that goes for this. So Nate, my synopsis and my recommendation, which we will then talk about, is you need a workhorse dentist who wants to work, Monday through Friday with maybe a day off in the middle of the week, and like wants to produce and wants to have those days where there's 4, like there's there's types of dentists out there that you have 3 or 4 hygiene columns for them to check, and they're doing 2 to 3 columns of restorative, and they are in their happiest place because they're like busy, they're going between operatories, they're very focused on how much production they're doing, how much money they're making. And what the office is missing is a workhorse doctor. So like, you have your 3-day-a-week associate. She's steady as she goes, but she's not that workhorse. She doesn't want to be. That's not her makeup. And you, 2 to 3 days a week, like you're looking at like kind of coasting a little bit. So you're not the workhorse either. So what the practice is missing is that person who's going to be very solid, always, busy schedule, seeing a lot of patients, and you want to tie them to the practice with equity. So this is where a minority share makes sense. And a minority share with some advantageous terms also makes sense potentially. And so what I think is missing is like that really high caliber person that you can't retain as an associate that you offer a partnership to, a minority share, and their value to you is, so your value to them is that you're giving them a high income, a lot of production, and they're going to make a lot of money clinically, and then they're going to have profit sharing, and they're going to have an asset. Like that's what's in it for them. And then what's in it for you is you have that person who's like keeping the patient base, checking for 4 hygienists when they have to. Like, you have that person who has that drive and that energy that goes into the office on a day-to-day basis and keeps it running. And then you get to take that back seat and work the 2 to 3 days a week, doing the procedures you like, and kind of have that income. And the thing that I was emphasizing in the first part that I want to reiterate again is where you get the return on investment is time. How many years can you sustain this? If you had that type of person tied to the practice with equity, you can sustain this for much longer. And so, Nate, that's my initial recommendation. And I feel quite strongly about it because I went through every other possible scenario. I think that we're repeating a version of broken if we try to bring in that person and we don't talk about partnership. And so I would recommend, talking about partnership more forward, try to get somebody who you think is really good, put like a 1-year trial basis on it with some pre-agreed upon framework. And then after a year, it seems pretty consistent. Like once you've had somebody for a year, you kind of know what they are. Then you sort of go to the next step. So those are my initial thoughts. And now I'm curious to hear yours.
No, I think that's great. I think that's what, in the back of my mind, I've been sort of teetering with the idea of that. I mean, certainly there's always just like kind of a little inkling here. It's been my baby for the last 11 years,
Yeah.
but it is something, I mean, to give up a minority stake of the office, for some predictability and to have an anchor doctor there, that's something I'm more than willing to do. The rest of my financial house is in order, so, it's not like the income I'm making right now, I can afford to little bumps in the road are not going to, really take me down. So, no, I think it looks great or sounds great. I think it's, just obviously finding that doctor and executing on that sort of partnership agreement. And I mean, I guess a couple follow up questions I have for you is, when discussing partnership, there does seem to be a lot of different ways to sort of structure it as far as like an earned in versus a buy in versus a combination of such. Is there something in your experience that you find is kind of sort of a sweet spot, or is it just kind of come down to negotiations with that doctor?
Yeah, so I think that for me, I would start with I wanna ask some questions. So yeah, like it's have you met this person yet? So like have you talked to somebody who in the last 5 years since you've been hiring associates, have you talked to somebody that or 1, 2, maybe a few people that you feel like fit this avatar of like this person's really and I hate to say this, but like this can be male or female,
Hmm.
but typically this type of dentist is more commonly found in a male. But that's not. I have a type of dentist just like this who's a female, so like it happens in both. But I find more because like females when they have their maternity leave type situation, that's very trajectory changing time for them where, work life balance becomes a higher priority. And you need somebody who doesn't have that as much. Like the work life balance is always going to be weighted more towards work. And that's just that person's makeup. So have you met people over the last 5 years that sort of cross this avatar and like kind of fit the workhorse dentist anchor type that we're looking for?
Not really, unfortunately.
Okay. So then that tells us something, right? That says that because if you had told me like I've met 2 or 3 of them, weren't super interested or whatever, then I think that honestly and you have to do whatever it takes to get them. And that's the short answer. It's like whether you do there's just like the deal structures are tools and I'll go through a few of them, right? You can have an earned equity type situation with time. So like you could do like for example, like a 5% a year for 4 years up to 20%. And then like, the idea is that person will grow the top line, grow the profit and provide that stability. And so it's like, you're going to give them one, thing. And then if they leave after so many years, you can take it back. Like you can do some type of deal structure like that. My sort of like the default down the fairway option that I'd recommend is things loosely discussed, framework loosely in place that we kind of both like 1-year trial period, then move forward with something legitimate. But let's just say that you find the right person, you present that option, you don't feel like you can get them. And I know that this is kind of counterintuitive, but like, and we're talking 20%, and 20% of your practice is a big investment. Like that's, call it $1 million of equity, right? So it's like, this is a big investment. So like 20% is so like the idea that you should have is like, okay, if I get this person in and I anchor them at 20%, then my profit will likely, from a dollar amount perspective, 80% of profit should hopefully be roughly a similar number in terms of monthly as 100% is now, because this person should push top line up because you have that workhorse plus yourself plus the other. So your thought process should be, I'm really looking, the stability is the North Star. The stability of the workhorse anchor is the North Star, and whatever I need to do to get that, I have tools in the toolbox. And once I find the right person, then I'm gonna use my tools to get the deal done. That's kind of how I would think about it more than Like, this is the right thing, and if the person doesn't take it, then you go to the next person because it's been 5 years and you haven't met them yet. So, once you get them on the hook, you kinda gotta reel it in.
Yeah. Do you find that in general, I mean, are most of these docs that kind of fit into this workhorse doctor looking for minority equity, would you say a buy-in, or is that generally sort of, I want to say like frowned upon, but looked upon negatively, or
No,
is
they
it?
want that. This type of doctor wants that. So this type of doctor commonly comes and says like, "If I'm gonna come, I'm gonna wanna buy in." I remember my first associate that I hired, um, I offered her the minimum of 120 per year. And she was like, "This is great. I love this. Like this is very comfortable for me." Like, and she was like very pleased with the minimum. And I was like, "Yes, great sign." But then actually that's like not good because then she was very comfortable with the minimum. Like there wasn't a lot of urgency for her to be very productive. And then this person's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like for them to move from what they're doing, it needs to be something enticing. And so, like, I found that there's the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like when you're getting somebody pretty good, the recruitment process is longer, they ask more questions, they're like less willing to just jump on it. They kind of need to be shown how this is going to be high earning. That type of person is just different. And I honestly feel like the challenge is your deal flow, so to speak. Like, and maybe it's not deal flow, but like associate potential doc flow. Like, the number of people you're looking at doesn't seem, it needs to be a higher quantity to find this person. And it seems like you're pulling out all the stops. I mean, this recruiting firm, I'm kind of surprised. When did you sign up for the headhunter?
We signed up probably 6, 8 months ago.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. And they've delivered really, really nobody of quality.
I think what you really need is someone to relocate for this. So you probably need a megaphone of some type, where you can say like, think of Facebook groups or forums or something where you're like essentially saying like, I have this opportunity, it's in this area. There's that group of person that they'll move somewhere for a good opportunity. That's probably your path because you've tried the tier one options of local search and we're not finding it. So like for example, you just had a meeting with your office manager where you guys talked about unscheduled treatment and like onboarding a minority partner potentially. And really, if you asked me, like that meeting should have been about how do we increase the number of dentists that get eyes on our opportunity. Like I think that's like your bottleneck is how many dentists are aware of what you're offering. And like, there's a group of dentists right now listening to this episode, right? So it's like there's a group of dentists here listening, maybe a couple thousand, and they maybe are in a situation where like, wow, this sounds actually attractive. Like I'm not making as much money as I'd like. This seems like I could make great income. I want to see a lot of patients. I want to do a lot of dentistry. I want a minority share. And, I'll reach out and I'll find out what part of the country this is in and see if that's viable for me. Like I think that's kind of who you're looking for is somebody who's willing to get up and move for the right opportunity. And it's a longer recruitment process because they've got to get licensed, then they've got to be a fit and all of that. And so I think that like step number one is I think you need to be more aggressive about volume of getting to people who don't live close to the practice and essentially marketing this as a very good financial opportunity and then seeing who comes your way because like the people that will move for this are more likely to have that mindset that we're looking for of the anchored dentist who wants to be very productive and push.
Right. They're going to be intrinsically motivated because they packed up and moved.
Yeah, and you say like this is a big part of, to go to the other side of the business, SPG. Like SPG is like very commonly gets dentists to move to markets that they did never have on their radar for opportunities. So it's like this is something that I know works, but it's a different, like you're getting a more financially aggressive dentist because that's what's getting them to move their family and themselves to a different location. So I think that you need to kind of like cater to that. And so I would look at Facebook groups, I would look at forums, I would look at paid posts. I mean, how much are you offering the headhunter?
I think about $8,000 after 90 days of employment.
Yeah. And it's only a success fee. Did you pay anything on the onset?
No, no, there was no retainer.
Yeah. So I would I would consider like, the value that this person has is like 10 to 20 grand of value in terms of like that's how much it would be reasonable to pay for this. So I think taking a some type of budget like that and saying, okay, like I'm gonna go blast on these megaphones and see if I can find somebody. And in your marketing pitch to the megaphone is all about the financial opportunity, right? You say like, I'm a dentist, the practice is big, it's productive, it's worth a lot of money. I'm really looking for somebody to be a workhorse who's willing to see 4 hygienists worth of patients. Like to some dentists is like, this does not sound like something for me. And then for the right person, they're like, oh, this sounds amazing. And you want that person who has that makeup and is frustrated in what they're currently doing to reach out to you. And then the part of the country is going to be a challenge for certain people. But like if you're getting the correct anchor dentist, like you haven't talked to an anchor dentist in 5 years, right? So you need to find a way to talk to anchor dentists, and the anchor dentists may not love the location, but at least you're going to start talking to them, getting a feel for their personality, all of that. Like then I see that as like a very viable direction for, I think you just need to, your bottleneck is not in the practice. It's out of the practice. It's finding this person. And so that same aggression, your whole team needs, like you and your OM should both be very interested in this pursuit, right? It should be a focus the same way that if your reappointment rate was awful, you would make it a focus. Like this is the same type of thing.
Right, right. Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Yep.
Okay, so I feel
Yep.
like I'm beating the same drum. So I feel like I've said what I have to say on this. So now what questions, comments, concerns, how can I help more?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. When I used to work with Alex Sharp, he was mentioning one of the things that some docs in my position do is they'll actually look at, they'll find DSOs locally around them and kind of reach out to some of the doctors that work there.
Yes, yes.
In my area of the country, DSOs do exist, but they are like few and far between. Where I'm at in the country, it's definitely more of a private practice oriented kind of region. So, I mean, other than like, the Aspens of the world, there's just not a ton of DSOs. So I'm having a hard time really exploiting that as well.
Does your office manager have like available time for a project like this or not really?
She does. Yeah, no, for sure. I catch her spending more time playing Office probably than she should be. So I think this definitely takes a higher priority.
I think that you need to think about it from the perspective of like, okay, how many different things can I have going for me in this? And I think outbound is a great one, right? So it's like you look at practices in the area, you look at their websites, you see which dentists are associates, and then you reach out to them. So I think that's an office manager type activity, is like outbound recruitment. And then I think your activity is like more finding people with audiences that you think have the type of dentist you're looking for, reaching out to them, trying to secure a sponsored post, and then posting, or just posting if it's available. Like I have a couple Facebook groups in mind that would be good for this. If I were you, I would have my office manager focused on outbound cold outreach to people locally. And then I would have you focused on megaphones nationally.
Right. Yeah. And I've even there's a couple docs, like younger docs within probably like a 5 to 7 mile radius of my office that I don't know them personally, but I just kind of get the sense that maybe they're either struggling or maybe not where they thought they would be at this point in their startup journey. And I've written them kind of letters of interest, just explaining kind of the pros of like maybe like a merger, something of that nature. And I just haven't gotten a lot of traction, using those methods either. So
Yeah. But I really think that, like, how many hours a week do you put on this over the last, you've been looking for what, 8 months now?
quite honestly, it's one of those things. I think it should be clear as day that this is the bottleneck and not nearly as many hours a week as I really should. I think is the answer to your question.
Yeah, it was a rhetorical question, right? I
Right,
asked a
right. Yeah.
question where the answer was going to make it obvious that this is,
Yeah.
so I think it's just one of those things that look like it's frustrating, right? And there's something that I often say, which this is more of a teaching moment. It's like there is a problem, and if you can solve that problem, it's trajectory changing long term for you. Oftentimes, those are the hardest problems to solve. And so it's like for you, you're kind of beating your head against the wall, can get frustrating, discouraging. You're like, what's the point? Like, it's like I keep doing the same thing. I'm not finding what I'm looking for. Like, I can see the deflation leading to like, okay, I'm going to focus on other things. But this is the type of thing that if you solve for it, it can change the outlook long term. And those are the things that are really worth just like almost digging your heels in and like really being obnoxiously persistent on a specific thing. And I think it's all the same, right? All the dentists in tertiary areas, doctor attraction is that thing. So, like, let's just say we're speaking to a dentist who's in a part of the Midwest who is like, kind of, off the beaten path, no major airport nearby, a couple hours away from a regional airport. Like, they've got ample patients, they might have space, but they don't have enough dentists, right? So it's like, if they could solve that dentist problem for them, the net worth, the growth, like all of that is very different. And so whenever you're kind of faced with that major obstacle that has very long-term implications, that's where you have the most leverage as an owner. I think in this situation, that's really it. Like, this is the biggest knob to turn, and it's also the hardest one, which you've kind of gotten to the point where you've like your reappointment's excellent, your AR is good, your case acceptance is awesome, your retention's great. Like, you've sort of knocked out the stuff that's like more within your control, and now you're really up against the thing that is not within your control somewhat, and you have to overwhelm it with volume.
I do have a question. What would you like estimate the terminal velocity of my practices given 11 ops and giving what do you say?
Yeah, so let me take a look at what you guys did last year, and then I'll go from there. So yeah, terminal velocity. So we have 3,600 patients. I would suspect, are you booked out in hygiene?
We are.
Yeah, so I would suspect your new patient flow has some room for growth based on what I'm seeing. I mean, you're at 3.14 for last year. How many docs were last year, the whole year?
I was just eight doctor days, so equivalent to two full-time docs.
Yeah, I mean, I think 4 to 5 is
Okay.
kind of what you're looking
Good.
at. Yeah, I think space is going to be the big constraint. So I think the 11 operatories will be your final constraint. And so you ask the question, what can we do out of 11 ops? I would say 4 to 5 million. You get a really good dentist in there, they'll be doing 100K a month. So that adds 1.2. And then you grow some hygiene. You might do some more specialty mix, like that you kind of get yourself to the 4.5. So I think that like that 4 to 5 would be the range that I'd be thinking about for you in terminal velocity. And I think your limiter is not patience, it's facility.
Yeah, we've got no more.
You started with 5 ops, right?
We started with 5 ops. Yeah, we built out 2 during the pandemic, and then we expanded in 2022, so
To the adjacent space. Yeah.
exactly, yep.
Yeah. So how are you doing with parking? I remember that was a challenge.
Parking's okay. I actually ended up purchasing there's a mixed use residential commercial kind of building slash house directly behind my office that I scooped up about a year and a half ago. So there's some parking there that I have available, so it hasn't been too much of an issue.
So I would say that, yeah, your 4 to 5 is kind of your range. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is a kind of maybe a sort of a basic question, and I think I know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Monday through Thursday, the office is jamming. We have tons of hygienists. Friday, we just have two hygienists. It's like a very chill day at the office. So I was talking to my office manager today, and we're trying to solve. We're creating the future associate schedule for the associate we don't even have lined up yet.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah, so we were thinking about just, what their schedule could potentially be. And initially she was thinking about putting the doc there like on Friday and then, 3 other days during the week. And I was discussing with her, like my viewpoint was like, I want that associate doctor there when all the action's happening at the office and when like all the hygienists are there and like things are firing on all cylinders. And she was like really against me like picking up a Friday or like every other Friday. She just thought like as being the owner doctor that like I'm like above Fridays more or less.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I was thinking about the idea of that, keeping our hygiene schedule, like really trying to build out the office Monday through Thursday, get it firing on all cylinders. And then Friday, kind of staying at that two hygienist schedule, but maybe alternating like every other week, having like a healthy, no exam, no doctor day. And then maybe the other Fridays, like I come in and just do high value cases when it's kind of quiet. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love that. So why don't we start first with your ideal schedule? So you said you wanted to work 2 to 3 days a week. Let's start with the anything you want, nothing off the table, right? Like, what does your clinical schedule look like in a perfect world?
Yeah, I think perfectly. It's probably like Monday, Tuesday. And if I go up to 3 days a week, probably like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I think would be like a secondary like ideal. But then I was thinking, well, maybe I could do Monday, Tuesday. that would be my schedule. And then just like every other Friday. So that would be like 2.5 days. And like that Friday would be reserved for like only those implant cases that came in that maybe I was booked out like a month for. And like, hey, I can get you in 2 weeks, or, like those bigger cases where time was of the essence and we could just squeeze them in as soon as possible.
So how do you like the idea of Monday, Tuesday, high value Friday? So it's like the team has a barometer. Because I agree, like if you're doing a $4,000 case or something like that, like you don't want to be running around in between. Like you kind of want to just have the time to knock it out.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on Monday, Tuesday, and then when you have high production on Fridays?
That seems like a great place to settle.
Okay. So then let's work backwards from that. So your associate has to work on Monday because
Right.
they need to. They also have to work every Friday because you can't be the hygiene guy, right? So you need an every Friday hygiene person. Then you say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, pick two.
Okay.
So I would say Wednesday, Thursday, right? Because if you're working Monday, Tuesday, then you would have the associate Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that would be my proposal. And then you really don't want them to have more clinical time than that, candidly. I think burnout will begin to be a thing. And so I think giving that Tuesday off is like it's the yo-yo. So it's like you've been the yo-yo, right? But then that Tuesday can be a bit of a yo-yo too. It's like if you want to come in on a Tuesday, you can to do high value production, or if you want to come in, but like I would eventually have Friday become a 3 hygienist day and have a single doc checking for 3. That's kind of would be my thought. Is I think the Friday can be built out a little bit more once you have an anchor.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Cool. You have anything else?
No, I think that was great. It was a great conversation. So learned a lot.
Okay. So maybe walk me through some of your takeaways.
I mean, I felt like things were running pretty well at the office. I'm glad that, I mean, I'm still working with my coach at SP. So, I mean, she's keeping a pulse on everything, but it's nice to get like a second set of eyes on it. And I'm glad that you sort of agree that we're in a good spot. So that's definitely reassuring. Although I knew that the doctor was really kind of the bottleneck, I think just realizing I'm not spending nearly as much time and attention on it as I need to be is, I guess, maybe kind of a little bit of a wake up call. And yeah, it was helpful to hear as well about the minority equity component of this. And I guess I haven't really considered expanding my search to maybe docs who are not in the same region as me. Yeah, that's definitely something I'm gonna be taking a look at as well. So, and yeah, I think like in my mind, when I first did the expansion, I was thinking like a terminal velocity of about $4 million. I know, we tend to sort of maybe underestimate what we can do, but I do think there's probably an opportunity to get somewhere between $4 and $5 million though if we get the right people in place.
I actually, I'll say, and those takeaways were awesome. Exactly what I was hoping you would take away. And I think that from my perspective, like earlier, so you talked about how in 2019 I was quite blunt and like, I would like to think that over the last 7 years, or I've like changed. People should evolve with time, and I think I've evolved hopefully to be more approachable and less abrasive, which has been a focus for me. But then also, I've also evolved to being more open minded to the fact that not one size fits all. So, like, if this practice was in Phoenix, where I live, I'd be like, churn through associates, be more picky, you'll be fine. Because, like, I put out an ad for an associate in Phoenix, you get 20 applications in a week. Like, it's just a totally different market, right? But the group practice in a rural area or a semi-rural area or an area where it's hard to find doctors in general, you have to have a different approach. And something that I've grown fonder of with time is the minority partner approach. And this is something if you've listened to many years of me, you haven't heard me talk about it a ton, because I think I've always been maybe closed off to the idea. But I think the thing that like I've kind of come to realize is really this type of dentist is routinely finding it unsustainable to have a group because there's too many patients, too many hygienists, and too much demand for what they want to be doing long term. And so I think that it's a different thought process where you're saying, okay, I'm gonna choose longevity, and longevity requires that I have an anchor. And I think that for me has been a growing edge where I've learned more and more that this is becoming necessary as I've helped people like you, Nate, grow. I've realized, okay, this is a solution to avoid that is common. So I think that there's a lot of dentists listening that would relate to a lot of your challenges, and they're good problems, right? You've grown a $3.15 million practice last year. Like, good problems, but nonetheless, they're problems. And so we need solutions, and we need to put something in place that makes it more sustainable long term. And I love the fact that if you do this, you don't need to sell to a DSO, and you can continue to cash flow your asset for more years to maximize the net worth outcome from the work that you've put in. So, like, that's more or less, my takeaway. And I'm happy that we were able to arrive at what you feel like is an adequate solution and that you don't have any additional questions.
Great. Well, thanks, George. It's great catching up.
So, folks, thanks for listening to this episode of Practice Underwater. And, something I've noticed from the audience is when we have, so Practice Underwater, it makes it sound like, and we've had people who are losing money and about to go bankrupt, and I had the Ass on Fire guy that people still remember. But, like, for the most part, we get a lot of people who are having success and just would like help. And actually, the response from the audience is stronger on those episodes. I hear from more people when those come out. So I think that, Nate, you're in a situation that a lot of people in our audience can relate to, and so thanks for coming on, sharing your story. We got to have you on again once you get this sorted out, so you can talk to our audience about how you got past this, because it sounds like it's this insurmountable challenge. And then we've sort of gone through a few steps, like cold outreach, broad outreach, and those, I think, are the two avenues to push and to find that type of person. And then once you have them, you found the person you like, then you're going to just have to be mentally flexible in finding a way to make it work. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm very happy that our audience had the opportunity to kind of follow the discussion through the two parts, and I'm looking forward to following your story. So thanks, Nate.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, circle back sooner rather than later with an update.
Yeah, that sounds good. See ya.
Resonate.